Hello, everyone. Welcome to yet another one of our capacity building webinars here at Africa Greenco. My name is Jehoshaphat Siame, and I am co-hosting this webinar session with Blongo Tela, who will also be presenting on one of our topics today. First and foremost, a Happy New Year, and welcome to the series of the webinars for this year. A huge thanks to everyone who joined us last year for the session that we did starting August. And what we have done essentially is put them online on our YouTube channel, which we created. So we have those videos ready for you, present, so that you can always go back and have that recap, because we understand the importance of the topics that are being discussed. And so diving on to today's session, we're going to be discussing power markets and trading, and we have esteemed professionals joining us today who will carry you through various different topics that we're going to discuss, of course, as mentioned by our emails and our invites that we've been bombarding you with. And so glad that you're able to join us today. And so to kickstart, we've seen that our numbers are people are still joining, which is good. And perhaps I will hand over to our presenters for today. We have Hans Bretzen, we have Keith Boyle, Love More, and also Longo Sela. So I will just hand over to them to do their intros and then send that back to Longo to take us through the next segments, and then he will pass on to Love More. So we can start with Hans.
Yes, hello everybody. My name is Hans Bredesen. As some of you know, I can see some familiar names on the attendance list. So I've been working for a long time with the power market, supporting both IPP and South Africa and some other countries in the region. And I will talk about kind of some of the background and history of power markets.
Great, thanks.
Okay.
Keith.
Yeah, good afternoon, everyone. My name's Keith Bowen. I'm with the National Transmission Company of South Africa, involved in the market operator space and looking for the development of the market operator, the wholesale market in South Africa. Thanks.
Thank you, Longo.
Good afternoon, everybody.
Yeah,
Love More, go ahead.
Thank you. I'm Love More Chilimanzi. I'm based here in South Africa. As of last week, I'm now an independent consultant, but my history runs back into power utility background, where I worked at ZESA, at the Kariba Power Station and Wange Power Stations, before running the National Control Center there. I'm in charge of system operations and electricity trading before I moved to Botswana, where I gave 18 years of my life in the same kind of capacity. Most importantly, I'm a founder member of the Southern African Power Pool, and its operations all the way up until 2013. That's when I went into consultancy. But I've been keeping abreast with the developments. I have been involved with a lot of things around the world, in Southern, Eastern Asia, and all those other places. And at least I do know Keith and Hans. Thank you.
Thank you, Love More. And thank you, Hans, Keith, for those introductions. And welcome everyone to another exciting segment where we look at specifically power trading and power markets. So to get us started is as Lovemore himself introduced himself. So Lovemore is going to get us kicked off. So Lovemore was one of the was really involved at the founding of the Southern African Power Pool, which is the regional power exchange. He'll share a bit more about his experience and his background in that respect. He's also a team lead, member for both ZESA, that's the Zimbabwe National Utility, as well as BPC. So they played a critical role in many formulations of agreements, rules, standards, performance during the formation and operation of the SAP interconnected grid and electricity trade. So he's been very involved, and he was very involved in that. So Lovemo will just share with us some of his initial experience in shaping the future of power pools and the trajectory from inception and what the road these power pools have traveled. So without any further ado, I'll just invite Lovemo Chilimanzi, who has an extensive experience in this area, to just come on and just share a bit of background, and then later on we'll transition to the rest of the speakers. Thank you. Lovemo, are you able
Thank
to?
You, Longo.
Yeah.
Thank you, Longo. If Anna is in the room, she won't forgive me for not mentioning that I'm a founder member of Africa Green Co. So sorry about that.
Precisely, yes.
Yes. If I may just go into the SAP, the formation, and how it evolved. And like you said, I was a founder member right from the beginning of it all, and seeing a few of the things getting established up to the competitive market. And of course, these developments of different platforms and of the latest stages, the status of it, where now I have left from 2013. But of course, I've got a good relationship with SAP, and I get to know a few things that are happening. The genesis of SAP was more of a confluence of two things, if you ask me. It was in the early 1990s. At that particular time, just before the early 1990s, the political situation in the region was such that South Africa was isolated because of its formation of the way government was formed. And in the early 1990s, a lot of things were changing in South Africa. And Nelson Mandela had been released. South Africa was still looking at integrating, and independence was imminent. But also at the same time, there was a drought in the northern countries that were dependent on hydropower. Zambia, Zimbabwe, and probably going all the way up to the DRC. Mozambique also had an effect, but Mozambique is downstream of the Zambezi and things like that. So it was not as gravely affected by the drought as was Zambia and Zimbabwe. But because of the politics of the day, there was an effort to win off Botswana from dependence on South African power. So a 220 kV line was built between Zimbabwe and Botswana, so that the interconnection between Botswana and South Africa would actually be safeguarded. And then Botswana would be dependent on power from Zambia and Zimbabwe. Then the confluence of the drought and then the political change changed everything. When the line was already built, it never was actually even eventually used because of the drought that was now in the north. And because South Africa is thermal-based energy-wise, and they had oversupply, there were now efforts to try and get power from South Africa to supply the drought-stricken Zambia and Zimbabwe. And at that particular time, there was only one line that could do that, which was the 220 kV line, which was put in for political purposes. So for the first time, people started thinking of, let's close this line and get power to the north. Because of Desperado, we tried to close that line. And when the line was closed initially, we started experiencing things that we didn't anticipate. The dynamics of a huge power system in the south going through a very small system in Botswana and medium-sized power systems in Zambia and Zimbabwe. The power swings that we experienced were untold. And at one point, we actually blacked out Botswana. So we tried about 2-3 times, and we realized it was not going to work. So we then started finding solutions. How can we do it? There's a drought. We want power in that region, and it's not working. So we found help from Manitoba Hydro in Canada, who were already running interconnected systems with northern states of the USA. So we then contacted Manitoba Hydro. They came and taught us on how to do interconnected operations. So all the concepts of control area, AGC, and the likes had to be taught to us by Manitoba Hydro. We had 2 sessions where Manitoba Hydro came to Southern Africa, to Zimbabwe, And we had 2 weeks of training. And then some of us were lucky enough to go to Canada and the northern USA to see things firsthand on how interconnected operations are done and how AGC is operated and control areas, how they work, and then all that. Then we then came from there and started by looking at the kind of agreements we wanted to have, which is the GMOUs, the UMOUs. We only had 2 committees, and in fact, the actual working group, a planning working group and an operating working group. I belong to the operating working group. And we had an overarching group, which has got the IOPC, Interconnector Planning, Operations and Planning Committee, which we were referring to. What is important to note here is that we were actually pushed by this situation to get into power pooling so that we could quickly share resources. It was not like a top-down approach. It was more like a bottom-up, because it was now the utilities that are suffering and they're going to the government say, can you allow us to do these things? So we pushed it from the bottom up, and eventually we got all the documentation in place and all the standards in place, everything, and we said, look, we are going to start. And of course, Manitoba Hydro was quite surprised because they were thinking it would take something like 2-3 years before we started, and we started within a very short time. So it was lucky that when we were all doing all this work, the 400 kV line was also under construction. This is the line from Botswana, from South Africa, directly to Zimbabwe, but passing through Botswana, with a provision that Botswana could connect at any time when it was ready. So we were working in this kind of an environment. So before that, there were interconnectors in the region, dating back from as far back as 1950s. One of the oldest interconnectors is actually the DRC Zambia 220 kV, which was put in the 50s. Then we had in the 60s, because of Kariba South, Kariba North, there was an interconnector there, 2 by 330 kV lines. And then if you look at just those 2, they will tell you that the northern part of Southern Africa was interconnected with that kind of interconnection. And the southern part, which is Namibia, Botswana, South Africa, Lesotho, Swaziland, were not interconnected to the northern part. It's not exactly true to say they were not interconnected. There was actually an interconnector which was supposed to be interconnecting them, but it had been a victim of civil war in Mozambique. This is the 533 kV DC line from Cabora Bassa to Apollo. So 1975, it was commissioned, and immediately it went into casualty. And it was out of service for about 16, 17 years. So basically, the 2 systems were not connected. So we were trying this 220 kV, which failed. And we now learned about interconnected operations from Manitoba Hydro, and we had a 400 kV coming in. So we prepared for that. And somewhere in 1995, that 400 kV line was commissioned, and we immediately started doing power pool operations. So we had the hydro rich north and the thermal rich south interconnected through that line. So that's 1995. We experienced a few things that we were not prepared for. I'm not going to go into details, but we did have some technical, some operational, some commercial, and to an extent, some political challenges. If I have time, I'll probably touch on them. Then, as things were folding up, we discovered that we could actually expand this interconnector. So just remember, at this particular time, we are not developing the market as in trading. We are power pooling. So we are connecting all these countries so that all the generators are connected to one grid, and then they become available for all members that are connected to be able to exchange power among them. So what immediately happened was the drought-stricken were now able to source the thermal power from South Africa through this line to Zimbabwe, to Zambia. And then that alleviated the load shedding, the pending load shedding, and the shortages and everything. And within a very short time, I think a year or 2, the environment changed. There was a lot of rainfall in the north. And so therefore, the Kariba dams, the Kafuyas, and them, they became full, and then there was more surplus power in the north. It was cheaper because it was hydro. So we had a reversal of power flows on the line. And so immediately we now started seeing, look, the support that can be there between the countries. South Africa really wanted the cheap hydro power from the north. and it started going into deals to import power from Zambia, from Zimbabwe. And then, of course, the power flows were changing. And those power flows were changing. A lot of things were changing also on the dynamics of the system. And we're going into addressing them. We then started expanding the interconnections themselves. So we started having the Botswana actually turned into that line which was going from South Africa to Zimbabwe. We then had the Mozambique line to South Africa restored. We then had in the early 2000s the Motracos, which is the 400 kV network. We had other lines going in from Namibia to South Africa. So we now had routes for more trade. We even the later in time, the interconnection between Zambia and DRC was also expanded. So we now had more interconnectivity and more power flows. And then we had some corridors that were created, the central, the eastern, and the western corridors. More of the central was really DRC, Zambia, Zimbabwe, Botswana, down into South Africa. On the west, we had the Zambia into Namibia and also the South Africa into Namibia. And of course, there are plans for expanding that corridor. On the east, we had the DC line from Mozambique into South Africa. And eventually, of course, there was a line also linking the east and the central, which was Mozambique, Zimbabwe. And so that gave us a platform for real proper trade among the countries. This went on for some time, and we had, maybe I should just say, what exactly then were we experiencing as a power pool? So we then realized that a power pool was really a system of collectively balancing demand and supply as interconnected members. We then started developing mechanisms for interchange of power among the members, and output from different plans was pooled, scheduled according to increasing marginal cost and dispatched according to merit order collectively. So we now had a very big pool of power. And one of the key issues was that we were operating under one agreement, which was the SAPA agreements, when we were operating to common standards, rules, procedures. And of course, we no longer did have just the bilaterals. One of the things that actually happened immediately is that our bilaterals were very stiff in the conditions of the actual contracts themselves. For example, you would have a bilateral with a load factor, which is stipulated that you must get 80% of your power from me under this contract. And those were very stifling in operations because, for example, Zimbabwe would have, let's say 100 megawatts of power from SNEL, and it's supposed to be taken at 80% load factor. It meant at night, when the load was so low, Zimbabwe would wind down Kariba to almost zero. You still have Wange winding down to its minimum generation, but you still have more power than the load. So it started causing instabilities. So the load factors were actually creating problems for the system. So you had dumping of power and all those kind of things. But when you interconnected, we started looking at those things and said, why should we continue like this? Why can't we renegotiate the load factors? Why don't we do certain things in different times when we have got these kinds of problems? So we started relaxing the conditions of the bilateral contracts. And this was by agreement, sitting in the meetings with guys, now we can improve operational efficiency. And we are allowed to actually start negotiating the bilaterals. And they started taking different forms. And immediately we started finding countries like Zimbabwe, which had shortage during peak and standard times, but had surplus in the night, actually started exporting. And so we're improving the efficiency of the whole power pool. What were the advantages of pulling the power? We had improved security of supply. We had mutual support for each other under distress, because we now had rules. Say if somebody is under emergency, you all have to support and hear the rules and that kind of stuff. We had optimization through access to different generators. So those that wanted to optimize with hydropower, like Eskom, for example, they would get power from as far as the DRC, and it would flow through Zambia, through Zimbabwe, all the way to South Africa. And those that had security issues and didn't want to depend solely on hydro would have some contracts that would actually capture some thermal power to give them some kind of base loading. So those were some of the advantages, savings in reserve capacity requirements. We now had a formula for how to share reserves for the biggest contingency. Whereas when we were individuals, we carried the reserve capacity to cover your biggest generator. We're now collectively covering the biggest generator of the power pool. And when you calculate those figures, they became lower than what we were keeping for ourselves when we were standing alone. And that meant that some of that capacity which was released could actually be sold out. So it improved sellability of power. Access to various ancillary services. The likes of Namibia, they have runoff river. So sometimes they've got spinning reserves, sometimes they don't have spinning reserve and things like that. They would actually contract. They did have an ancillary services contract with the ESCOM in addition to the main energy contracts. We had high reliability of operation. And of course, because of the mix, there was also decarbonization issues and possibilities of even more interchange of power. The trade advantages of power pooling, possibility of a fair, centralized multi-platform. Well, what I need to say now is after we had operated for some time, 95 to about 2000, in a power pool environment, and it was a loose power pool for that matter. We then started thinking of improving the efficiency of trading itself and trying to develop a competitive market. So the executive committee set in 1999 and instructed the management committee and the other committees to say, now we should think of starting a competitive market. So we started working on how to actualize that, going into developing all the documents that were required for that market. And by 2001, we started the first competitive trade under what was called the short-term energy market. It was very crude. We just used to equally share what power was there, and we were clearing, like the first power comes at a certain price, we clear it among everybody who wants just share it equally. So if there was 10 megawatts and there were 5 people who wanted, you just say 10 divided by 5 and you give each other 2, 2, 2. Then you go on to the next level and you divide again. So it was not like what we have now in the dam where we've got MCP. So with time, we decided to change that and improve it to the day-ahead market somewhere around 2009, which was actually a very difficult time because we were trying to improve the market at a time when there was a deficit of power because of the surplus had run out, and there were also droughts and all those kind of things. So it was a leap of faith when we were developing a market, a competitive market at a deficit situation. It then happened that around 2012, 13, things started changing. So the day-ahead market started coming up. And then, of course, we developed all the way up to where we are now, where we even have a balancing market. But the advantages that we had from there was, of course, we now had a fair, centralized market platform. And the prices were reflective of cost because of the MCP principle, searching for price, and then trade arising out of peak diversity. We had that. The countries were not coincidental in peak. And so we also had trade that was actually taking advantage of that. We had more efficient trading using time of use principles, which we didn't have before. And the load factors that I told you about were actually now dropped out. And the nature of contracts started changing from very long term to very short and medium term. And we had a wider market for trade. For example, the likes of CEC could actually reach out into loads that were in DRC and they were supplying them. So a lot of things were changing. We also later had different market participants. There were advantages in investment. There's deferment of or postponement of investments, which means we realize time value of money and the cost of lost opportunities. We had signals that were quite very well efficient for investment. We had possibilities for joint projects. For example, the Motracos came out that time, and we had the Mozaros coming into the region. I will not go into the history of that, but it was just an effort of the power pool to get Mozaro into Mozambique from Australia. Diversification of energy mix helped on the decarbonization, like I've said, and with regional optimization of resources. And we started actually jointly planning the expansion of the network in the region. One cannot talk about advantages without also talking about the disadvantages. The disadvantages that we came across were things like there were complexities associated with dealing with different regulatory authorities in different countries. So certain things had to change, sometimes at legal policy level, for regulations to be able to be promulgated to do these certain things. For example, the transmission pricing was not an easy thing to get across from our postage stamp to the megawatt kilometer, and then all coming and agreeing on how we should be basing or evaluating assets so that you can calculate the price of transmission. Those were very difficult negotiations. So collectively finding solutions to complex problems was quite a problem. Consensus was difficult at times. There were also discipline issues since we have got different entities operating together. Even though you have got common rules, some people can choose to defy rules, and you had to deal with some of those things. So those were some of the disadvantages we had, and difficulties in utilizing infrastructure. So some infrastructure, in fact, if you think of it, all the infrastructure which was there, which we were using, was put for certain purposes, which was not international trade. So we had to start thinking of how to use that infrastructure now for what it was not meant for. But we had a purpose in mind, one objective of exchanging power within the region, using the infrastructure which was put for other things. So deciding to let go of certain capacities on certain trading routes for certain members were some difficult negotiations to be had. So basically, we had quite a lot of those things. It's a short time that I have to speak. You can ask me questions, but around 2001, we started the competitive market. It has been developing. If I may just sort of summarize, there are lots of things that I can talk about, but for the given time. I look at the evolution of the sub-market. When I looked at it in 2020, it was like three phases, but now we have a fourth phase. So the phase that I looked at was from 1990 to 1995 as the first phase, then from 95 to 2005 as the second, 2005 to 2016-17 as the third, and then onwards from 2017. So the first phase, if I may summarize, this is a time when we're founding SAP. We had to produce the IGMOUs, IUMOs, ABOM, operating guidelines. It was a period dominated by bilateral trade, no central coordination of trade. We had mostly hydropower traded, although we started with a shortage where we needed to move thermal power. Eventually, it quickly changed to more of hydropower being traded during the years of hydropower. Of course, it was cyclic. There were times when we needed to move power from the thermal region to the hydro, and it has become now more prevalent than it was then. We had inefficient rigid contracts, like I said, high load factors. We had things in our contracts called first right of refusal. For example, you are being supplied by ESCOM. In the contract, you had a clause which says, if you find somebody who is cheaper than me, you talk to me first before you get to the cheaper power, and those were making you captive. So it captive contracts because of that. Then in the second phase, which I have called the early interconnected operations and trading, this is the 1995 to 2005. In this period, that's when we established SAP, and we connected the north and the south of the region. We had a loose power pool. With the exchange of thermal energy started because of surplus energy. We had peak prices that were now rising because the thermal power was more expensive than the hydro. So when you were trading when hydro is not there, the thermal power was becoming peaky and peaky in price as well. Review of the sub documents. We had to review the sub documents to establish the competitive market. So we had to now have the market participation agreements, the market rules, and the likes and the likes. So in this phase between 1995 and 2005, we established the STEM, which had a neutral market operator, with trading timelines, security deposits, security settlement periods, and all those things. We then promulgated them. We also had improved trade efficiency because of introduction of time of use, and market prices dropped. You can't believe it, they actually did. We had, I can tell you of a good example of BPC where I was that time in Botswana. We used to get power from South Africa, but because the market was now liberalized, we ended up importing power sometimes from Zimbabwe, which was a net importer before, and it would come at much cheaper prices, and prices would actually go down, and of course it started pushing prices down, even the ESCOM ones. And importers started to export, and trade volumes increased, and the number of contracts increased. There was separation of transmission, TSO, and trading. So around this time, when we were establishing the market, the trading offices in the utilities, we started learning new things. We started trying to, we could now separate between system operations and trading. And we started setting up new offices, which had different focus. So the system operations before that was bifocal. It used to look at system operations and trading at the same time. Now we started separating that, and we sharpened the focus and improved the economic and technical efficiencies by splitting that focus. So in the third phase, where we started market transformation, which is moving from loose power pool to tight power pool with higher competition, we then had a lot of short-term bilateral contracts resurfaced. We had DSM, we had a lot of clauses, we had emergency supplies that came in because of the shortage. We had regional deficits, of course, from 2008, and net importers were stranded, of course. No reserves of the system. We ran the system for a long time without reserves, with a very high time error. And inadvertent energy problems, we experienced that, and system instabilities because of so small signal oscillations, things that we were not prepared for. They happened. We were having blackouts, and we didn't have the solutions. We had to go out and look for solutions. We found somebody in Norway, or Per Hegley, who could actually do small signal oscillations. I'm sorry, I'm probably taking longer time than I wanted, but I'm just concluding. And that taught us a lot of things, because the politicians were now coming back to us and say, look, you guys, you told us when you connect, you're going to give us benefits. And for sometimes we thought we saw them, but now we are blacking out the countries. What kind of operation is this? So we had threats from the politicians to say, if you don't get over this problem quickly, we are going to stop your market. So we had to find solutions, and eventually found that our PSSs were not well tuned in the region. We got somebody to come and help us to do that. And then we moved on and started developing different platforms. 2015, we have the FPMs and the likes. And in the fourth quarter, with fourth phase, we now have even balancing markets and the like. So I don't want to go too far. Probably that will give you a good background. There's lots of things I can talk about, but not for today, or maybe not for this time slot. Longo, is that fine with you?
Thank you, Lavmo. So that was Lavmo Chilimanzi there, just giving us an understanding of the background of the power exchange in the region, SAP, and as he was involved in that, as well as he has mentioned co-founder of Greenco, so just sharing his journey in that. So to make good on time, Lavmo will have questions asked of you after presentation by Hans. So I'll just invite Hans now to just get ready to present. So introducing Hans. So Hans has extensive experience in various power markets design and trading arrangements since the 1990s, where he was involved in developing the first market system at Nord Pool. Since then, Hans has been involved in supporting the power industry in the region with consultancy, advice, implementation, and IT services connected with establishment, design, regulation, implementation, and operation of both national and regional power markets in more than 20 countries. So from California, China, Japan, and a number of countries in the region. So Hans has been there, and he has that expertise to share. So I'll have Hans come over now and share his experience, and then I'll invite our participants, your dear participants, to prepare any questions you may have at this point before we will continue with the rest of the presentations. Thank you so much. Hans, over to you.
Yeah, thank you, Longo. Again, I will try to do a speed talk on power markets and talk a bit about market reforms in general and some of the history, both from the Nordics, where I come from, as well as looking a bit into how power pools and regional markets is part of the solution to some of the challenges we have today, and also some personal views again on what is important now to let's say take both SAPP and I also mentioned EAPP forward in the coming years. So again, what is a power market and the market reform? So this is a slide that I know some of you online have seen me present before, and I think the headline is kind of the key message here, that the market reform is a process and not a project. Again, referring back to my home countries, we started our market in Norway in 1993, and we are still continuing to develop the market here in northern part of Europe. So even now, more than 30 years after we started, we still are developing and changing our market. So unfortunately or fortunately, this is not a static process where you run the project for 3 years and then you can say that you're done. And of course, there is a lot of things that will have an effect on both the national and regional market reform. Of course, the let's say the standard or kind of hard parts of it is, of course, that we have a transmission system and you have somebody generating power and somebody consuming power, so represented by generation, transmission, distribution, and retail here. But then, of course, you have somebody that organizes this. In most markets or more power sectors, you will have a system operator, but now with a market coming into place, you also need to have somebody operating the market, like a market operator. But then you also still have bilateral trading going on, unregulated or regulated, a lot of legacy contracts that exist. And then, of course, we got the two fuzzy bubbles on top here, which is concerning kind of the politics and the regulation of this market, which will have an effect on how you progress. But again, regardless of market designs and centralized or decentralized or how you're going to implement the market, kind of the key thing with introducing a market and the market as part of the power sector is that you essentially are now using the price as the determining factor on, from a generation point of view, which unit shall you run to meet the demand and which are too expensive or maybe too valuable that you save for a more rainy day or a tougher period of the season. And essentially you are using production, the price, the willingness to buy, willingness to sell as the determining factor for also the power balance. Which means that, again, price becomes a very important part of how you're also running your system. And again, one of my favorite slides with a lot of merit behind it is that the power market is a happy marriage between the economist and the engineer. So, of course, power markets means kind of a generic market represented by John Maynard Keynes to the left. But of course, the problematic thing about electricity is that you cannot store it. So we have, let's say, a network and something physical that we need to align with in the market, again, represented by our AC and DC friends, Tesla and Edison to the right. And if you look at kind of how this shall be achieved, you need to find a balance between the, let's say, the economist who wants, of course, free markets, open markets, large areas, standardized products, a lot of buyers and sellers with as few limitations as possible, while the engineer is having almost the opposite view of this, where he wants the market to represent the underlying physical power system, including kind of splitting up the different trading areas in granular points, and essentially customize products to solve the real problems that they have from a system operation point of view. And of course, while the economist doesn't care who's buying and selling, the engineer always want to know as much as possible about the people that are using his network. And then again, you need to try to find that balance between let's say free market versus secure operation of the system. And again, we have seen in many market reforms that you can actually identify these, let's say, battles that has been ongoing, and also by the result in the market design see, I shouldn't say who won of the economist and the engineer. But a key thing is that the market is a tool, and the market is then, let's say, fueled by the planning of the different parties. If you are a generator, you need to do your generation planning. You need to do, need to know your sources of fuel, whether that is something that you burn, or if this is water or wind or sun. So you need to know how to plan and price how you are going to utilize this. Likewise, as a buyer, you need to, of course, understand what is the need of yourself and your customers to know how much you need to buy from the market and how easy it is to get access to this, and at what prices you would like to get this. And if you look at the history of how this has evolved over, let's say, the last 30 years, is that we are moving from a vertically integrated system that was kind of where we started back in the, let's say, 80s, where there were very few unbundled or competitive markets in place, moving towards kind of a series or a wave of unbundling, if I can call it that started and happened mostly in the 2000s, but still is ongoing. So again, we'll hear about the NTCSA in South Africa, which is part of an unbundling story. And you see now that if you're looking into the future, you will see more and more diversification, more and more decentralized solutions where the, let's say, the end consumers and prosumers or end generators are taking part in the market, if I can call it that. And this kind of opens for a lot of new issues and new things that you need to solve in the market. And again, looking at, of course, also historical development, but if you look at kind of the way that most markets have evolved, kind of everybody started here with the monopoly, with the electricity company of a country, and then have gone through various points of market openings, and you can kind of, there's a natural progression kind of from the monopoly going to where you compete in generation by having a single buyer model, for instance, then going into a more competitive environment where you allow competition both with generation and wholesale retail, and then potentially going all the way down to retail competition, where you allow us as end consumers taking part in the market. And it's a national or a natural trend to essentially move from the monopoly situation down to retail. But as some of you have heard me say before, again, this is not necessarily only path. So for instance, Japan, when they went from a monopoly situation, they actually started with retail competition. So you can kind of choose your own path, even though that actually in the Japanese situation, we can discuss if they achieved what they wanted to do. Again, on market structures, kind of looking at unbundling, you will see that there was Professor Hogan in the US that drew this picture to the left, which was kind of seen as the blueprint of a market structure where you essentially diversify or unbundle the different parts of the power system generation, transmission, distribution, and essentially consumption or retail, where you essentially went from vertical integration. You can see in a more colorful version to the right. But again, the main thing here is that some part of even the liberalized energy market still remains as a regulated business, which is of course then the wires business. But then you also have a competitive environment on top of this. And the key is that you need to manage and regulate this in a different manner depending on, again, the situation on the ground. And again, kind of this virtual wheel of liquidity, I think we have called it at some point. The key is that you would like to have a stepwise market implementation where you start, let's say, controlled and let the market earn its trust by essentially showing that with an efficient price setting, this shall kind of by its own voluntarily drive the liquidity in the market by essentially you start getting some trading being done in the market. People see the market becomes more or kind of start to establish prices. You understand what the prices give you. This might attract some more liquidity. With more liquidity, the reliability of the market increases, which again leads to more trading, which became hopefully then makes the market become more attractive, increase liquidity, etc., etc. So hopefully the market is developing in an upward spiral, driving with liquidity, driving kind of the trust and the let's say benefit of the market. And again, you can see the main targets. Of course, you would like to have price signals, which is based on the economic and fiscal situation of the underlying market. You want to have trust, and the only thing you can get trust is to provide a neutral and consistent operation of the market over time. And then, of course, kind of hopefully support transition and technology disruption in the same. And there's a lot of nice words here, moving towards unbundled cost-restricted tariffs. Again, trying to set the correct price. And the criteria of, I think, almost all, let's say, algorithms that feeds a market is what we say on the top here, trying to maximize the socio-economic welfare for everybody who's participating. This is true to the national markets, and this is also true to the regional market. What is specific for the regional market is that you need to then add something after the maximizing the socio-economic welfare, because you are doing that for the whole region, not necessarily doing a sub-optimized solution for each of the countries. But we'll come a bit more back to this. And I've been using this as a slide to trying to let's say, sell the idea of a market, because again, a market is a tool that helps you take good decisions. It will make the world simpler for you that participate, because again, what the only thing that you need to consider is what are my costs and what am I willingness to buy and sell for in the market. As soon as I established kind of my willingness to buy and or sell, I'll offer that to the market, and the market will find the best counterpart for me. And thereby they will also then do an optimization of the utilization of the resources across the board, even if independent if it is a national or regional market. And again, if you are coupling markets, we'll talk a bit more about this later, then you're giving access to a bigger market and liquidity to a pool, to a regional pool, that will again, let's say, increase your market and increase your counterparts and hopefully make sure that you are getting an even better result. The power pools are the central counterparty, so again, they manage all the payment and payment risks, which is a huge benefit compared to signing long-term bilateral agreements where you need to kind of manage that per agreement. And again, as we said, socioeconomic welfare maximization, which is of course the main target for a government, for a ministry, and for a regulator, making sure that we are trying to find the optimal solution and the optimal utilization of all assets. Focusing a bit on NOPUL, which is, I can say it because I come from the Nordics, is kind of at least one of the successful stories about developing a regional market where it has been a very consistent and controlled way of let's say, growing and operating this, even though it has found a different path, if I can say it like that, than the African power pools, because again, the evolution in the Nordics has been an evolutionary development also in geography. So again, it all started with our Energy Act in Norway in 91. We started our Norwegian market in 93. Sweden joined in 96, Finland in 98, Denmark in 99 and 2000, and thereby through a period of 7-8 years, we become the kind of Nordic power market. And then again, we have expanded 2010 to UK. We started the Baltic integration, started in 2010, finished in 2013. And then again, continued to evolve with the Northwestern European power market coupling in 2014, which has now led to what we know is the let's say European integrated market, where almost all countries, so all countries in EU plus some outsiders, like for instance Norway, are coupled in the common both day and intraday market. And again, it's an interesting kind of evolution in that sense, because it has been progressing kind of in a, not in a steady line, but with a steady target over all of these years. And it has been supported by kind of a view of meeting these common goals of regional cooperation and more efficient management of our resources. And for those of you who have read the news lately, so one interesting thing that has happened kind of the last days is that due to the, not only driven by the Russia-Ukraine war, but also by actually a long-term plan in the Baltics, they have now switched from the Russian system to the European system, and now form part of the European integrated, let's say, system as well from a fiscal point of view. What is kind of, we started our market in the Nordics as a bottom-up approach driven by the need of the market players. But what has happened after kind of this has become more and more of a European process is that the European Union has taken over as a driving force. And I will always say that EU is maybe sometimes too obsessed about price signals. So you can see kind of in this slide, kind of they want price signals to drive usage, dispatch, and investments, and to the largest extent possible reflect the actual situation in the system. So again, scarcity pricing, so allowing prices to really reflect the underlying system. Allow imbalance prices to become cost reflective up to value of lost load. So again, extreme pricing. Dynamic pricing at retail. So again, you should not we as end consumers should be part of this. But as a counter, let's say, to all of this volatility that is introduced by the first one, is that the market needs to value flexibility and system services. So again, people that can provide that should be kind of given the correct value. And of course, the last one is then to have risk hedging products that again protect against all this volatility created by the first points. And again, not going into this in detail, but again, it's the EU regulation which is transposed to law sets a lot of rules on how we are going to operate this. So I think this is a good thing because we got a pretty well-defined regulatory framework. But of course, having 27 countries and 27 regulators, ministries, system operators agree means that every change will take quite a long time. And we have ended up with this model, which is kind of pretty generic, but again, trying to have a holistic, let's say, setup of the markets where you have longer term markets allowing you to fix essentially prices. So again, take away the price volatility, either by financial or physical contracts. We have the two short-term markets where you as market participants are allowed to trade yourself into balance, as we very often refer to it, meaning that you are now trying to figure out what you really need for tomorrow and what are your real prices for tomorrow to buy and sell. Yeah, the day ahead, that happens a day ahead, of course, and then you have intraday that allow you to adjust closer to real time. There is a handover after the intraday market closes to the system operators, where they will have balancing markets to assist the system operation to manage the frequency. And then ultimately at the end of the day, you will have an imbalance settlement that kind of true ups whatever has happened throughout the markets. And the benefit of the regional markets is, again, I should probably at some point redraw this showing the Southern African region, but I think it's in all regions I've been working around in the world, you have variations of this, where we have different production mixes in different countries. As Longmore said, you also have different peak hours and different, let's say, different elements that will shift your peaks throughout the day that you can manage. So you can see kind of Norway, a lot of hydro, Sweden and Finland with a bit more balanced kind of setup, Denmark with a high wind penetration. And by this, if you look to the right here, of course, when we have a dry year, we in Norway need support from our neighbors, because as we are kind of 95% hydro, when it's not raining, we are in trouble. We need then support from our more thermal systems. While when it's wet, we can export and give away or provide clean and flexible power. While again, Denmark and also with Denmark being connected to Germany, when it's blowing, we get a lot of this free clean hydropower being pushed upwards, where we can store that power, if I can call it, in our reservoirs. But then again, when it's not blowing, they are highly dependent on flexible hydropower from Norway and the more thermal system from Sweden. But all in all, this means that by being interconnected and supporting each other, we can live with less reserves in each other countries, because we can lean on each other depending on the system, and thereby provide a more cost-efficient system. And I always like to show this from Denmark. Again, Denmark now had, I think in 2023, they had 70% of their installed capacity came from wind, and 59% of their consumption was met by wind. And you can ask, kind of, if you ask somebody about this kind of 15 years ago, they say it can never work. But actually, Denmark has the highest security of supply in Europe. And of course, the reason why is that it's not the wind system, but they are heavily interconnected and have a good benefit of the regional interconnected system, so that they can essentially get flexibility and power from the neighbors when they need it, and at the same time get rid of, if I can call it that, their power in surplus areas. So they have a very high number of hours during the year where they are essentially running their whole system on wind. where they have kind of 120% of their consumption being generated by wind. And again, will regional market provide affordable prices? I'll ask you to download. If you search in the bottom here, you can see the link to this ACER report. Essentially, what ACER did is that because we now have a repository of all trades and all market prices and all transmission capacities in Europe, essentially ACER reran the year of 2021 without any interconnections to see what the effect, kind of the blunt effect of regional market, I might say, because this kind of removed every interconnector. But you can see the savings was 34 billion euros for a year on having the regional market. And you can also see that price volatility. So again, the difference between the highest and the lowest price, this is also dampened a lot by having integrated market compared to isolated markets. And then again, if you look at regional markets worldwide, so I stole this, borrowed it from the World Bank. So you can see there are quite a lot of regional markets being developed around the world. It is a trend both from an interconnected system perspective, but also from a regional market perspective. So I tried to list here some of them. And then again, I've been speaking about this for quite some time, and then why is the regional market a good idea? And especially when you're talking about smaller countries, because a small systems is vulnerable. Few generators, often on few technologies, and also then local market power. So again, there is a dominant player. Flexibility is challenging because then either you have to overinvest and you have a lot of flexibility that just sits there for the bad day. And kind of meeting the transition is a huge challenge because both that you need to invest and replace, but also the fact that how can you absorb a higher penetration of renewables? So, and again, of course, you see this kind of in the Southern African region to make a business case for the project where the only off-taker is the national market. It's very hard. Weak balance sheets in the countries makes it harder. And there is then thereby often a higher risk premium added to the investment cases. And thereby you very often end up as a small country being reliant on a bigger neighbor for system services, and then often at a high cost. So we've seen this all around the world, nothing special to the African situation. And then again, kind of the solution is, of course, that if you can have a regional market and a regional cooperation, a lot of this becomes a lot simpler. But it needs to have a sound political foundation. You need to have proper governance. But again, don't leave it to the politicians. We need to have solutions made by the ones who knows. And you can see around the world, SAP is a good example. Some other power pools or regional organizations might not be that good examples. And again, this is one of my favorite slides ever in regional markets, because again, I really believe in the slogan on the top, allowing for regional cooperation, but maintaining national control of the asset. So the key thing here is that when you join a regional market, you are not giving away any control of your national assets. The way that we can manage this allows you to have full control of your national market. And Keith will talk about kind of the integration between the South African and SAP. How this is going to be implemented, very similar actually to the top level that you see in the screen here. But it's also important that when we build a regional market, that we allow countries to move in their own pace and decide their own market reform. And thereby becomes kind of important for the regional market to have flexibility in the market design, the market rules, the market platforms, how you manage legacy contracts, and how you do a market opening. So we have seen that SAPP has been good at this. I'm also working now very hard with EAPP at the moment, and one of the key things is the last thing here, kind of, do we need to have everybody on board to kind of take the final step? And I think the answer to that is no. You cannot let the slowest mover be the one that sets the pace, because then you normally don't move at all at the end of the day. And thereby also this is something that just highlights this, as you get the regional schedule, but it's combined with the national schedule, you end up with a local dispatch, and you don't give away the dispatch control to a regional pool. And again, we did the study kind of some years back, again showcasing that the key for, especially for Southern Africa and for some of the smaller countries, is that if you want to absorb renewables, the regional market is essentially the solution to this. Otherwise, it will be impossible, for instance, for Namibia to invest a lot in renewables, because something needs to balance this. And last but not least, a few slides on the market evolution for Southern Africa. I just put this up here. I'm currently also leading the EAPP market implementation. And as some of you might have heard, and I think it needs to dawn on some people, is that this market will come in a couple of months' time. There's a hard push in the region to create an Eastern African power pool, very similar, or have a lot of similarities with SAPP, but a bit different. And I think this is going to be a very interesting case for everybody, hopefully, on this call, because we are talking about, and this is from also a project that we did on looking at the coupling between SAPP and EAPP, that at some point, I think 2027, I think at least the most optimistic timelines for the Zambia-Tanzania interconnector to be ready. Then suddenly the vision of trading from Cape to Cairo is not that far away, actually, because then essentially the whole, let's say, eastern leg of Africa will be interconnected. It will be important to take this into consideration. My final slide on some of the concerns, and again, it's my views, so don't take this as anybody else's view than me. On some of the concerns is that SAP and also EAPP is governed, controlled by the national utilities, which means that, again, the accession of market participants, so again, non-national utilities, is, to my view, very rigid and cumbersome. So again, the SAP rules on you need to prove 5 megawatts ready for the open market. So again, who can do that before we actually build the plan? It's a very strange requirement. Also, that you need the approval from the executive committee. So again, why do you want the subjective decision? It should be neutral. If you meet the requirements, you should be automatically allowed in. And it's an extreme lead time to become a market participant. And we have site visits included there. So again, don't they trust that the national regulators that have given them connection agreements and trading access, that they haven't done the job? It's just something that delays it. So I think, again, EAPP is moving in this direction already, talking about an independent market operator. So the market operator not being part of the power pool, so that you can create a body that is just focusing on the market. And then again, of course, but this is also kind of natural, that the national frameworks are still, let's say, in premature stages. So the modified single buyer in Namibia has a very good framework, but in reality, it hasn't been that easy to get access to export, for instance. The open access in Zambia, we need the final rules to be in place. The South African one, of course, it's work in progress. Keith will talk about this just now. And the key thing is that we need to have good governance for this. And then again, you all have seen this before if you have heard me talk. I think you need to be persistent if you want to do a market reform. So this is, again, Martin Luther King. He didn't talk about market reforms, but I think it's very suitable for market reforms that will take a lot of time. So thank you. I think we can move to any questions.
Thank you, Hans, for that very insightful presentation. And so we've reached a point where we can have Q&As both for Lovmore's presentation as well as Hans' presentation. I see that there are a few questions in the chat. So Hans, I'll maybe give you a go at answering them, and potentially Lovmore as well. So the first question I believe is from Merek, who's asking that in power trading, liquidity is essential as it fuels market activity. Currently, nearly 80 to 90% of power transactions are bilateral / IPPP. Could this pose a challenge for market reform in the region? Hans, I'm not sure if you got that, but it's in the chat.
Yeah, I can see it.
Yeah.
Yeah, but again, you are pointing to something that kind of, let's say, it's a semi-frustration when you're doing a market reform, because ideally you will say that, oh, let's just cancel all of these contracts and let's start from scratch. But of course, you cannot do that. So the key here is that, and this is actually a very important part, that when you do a market reform, don't, let's say, take a regulatory or ministerial decision to abolish or change these contracts, because that removes all investments, let's say, certainty to your country if you do that. But you need to find a way to allow the market evolve together with these legacy contracts or the existing contracts. And again, we have seen kind of various ways that this can be done. So I'll let Keith talk about some of the solutions that we have implemented or are planning to implement for South Africa. That is a way to allow these contracts to still be honored by, but also then form part of, let's say, the liquidity in the market. There are also what you can hope for, and this maybe we should ask that to Greenco or to some of the people that are trading in the market, is that we very often also see, as soon as the market picks up some liquidity, that the parties of bilateral contracts will see that the inflexibility that my bilateral contract gives me actually is not good for neither the buyer and the seller, and they voluntarily renegotiate to use the market in a better fashion. But again, it's the way it is. Don't touch them, or don't push to touch them, but rather let people decide themselves if they want to change their contract when they see the market. And again, the key is that the market needs to be allowed to evolve over time. So we will never see a market. I didn't talk about California, where I also was part. When you try to do a big bang, it also often ends with a bang. So you need to do a stepwise implementation of this. So this is where kind of 80-90% is bilateral. To me, that's fine, because that means that you can have 10 to 20% that can come to the market. And hopefully the market can show that this is a more efficient way of trading.
Thanks. Yeah, thanks, Hans. That's an important clarification and response on the volume segmentation between bilateral and the competitive markets. Would you like also to respond to Paul, who was asking you to repeat on the estimation of the commissioning of the Tanzania-Zambia interconnector? Yeah,
please don't hold me. This is the most. There's probably somebody closer to you in Zambia that has hopefully a better estimate. But I've seen an estimate of that happening in 2027. So the ZTK. Of course, as we know, the Tanzania-Kenya has already been put in operation. That happened just before Christmas. Essentially, yeah, let's see if it's going to be 27 or 28. I think the key now is that it's not that far into the future, and it will be extremely important for both power pools and all the countries involved that they are planning this properly, so that when that line is energized, how are you going to allow power to flow north-south through that interconnector? And also, of course, what will be the effect of having now suddenly Southern Africa being kind of in general a deficit region connected to Eastern Africa, which is in general a surplus region. It sounds like a good idea. Okay, I think you can go ahead, Lomor. I see you raised your hand. I don't know if you lost Longo or yeah.
Oh, okay. Thanks, Hans. Just to compliment you on the question of liquidity and the likes, and of course you have ably answered it. But maybe just to give a perspective, especially from the experience of Southern Africa. I don't know if you're hearing me.
Thank you so much, Hans, for that. So a lot more. Would you like to share your thoughts around the questions discussed?
Okay. Am I audible? I didn't. Can you hear me? Hans, can you hear me?
Yeah, I hear you. I hear you. Yeah.
Okay. No, I thought I would just compliment you on the question of liquidity and having more power for competitive trade and the likes. Yes, like you said, Hans, it depends on a lot of things. And of course, you would really want the market to be more vibrant on the competitive market, that is, because there's better value and of course there's competition, and then the prices can be very reflective of forced by market forces. But what you find in certain places, especially in the case of Southern Africa, is the experience, which is actually sort of retarding market growth. It's the experience of what happened in 2008. Before 2008, a lot of countries in Southern Africa were depending on some bilateral contracts, which were all hinged mainly on Eskom, which was itself coming into a deficit situation, but people didn't take heed of the warnings that they were being given or given by Eskom itself until it actually hit. Before then, the competitive market itself, the share was growing, but then it just came to one date when all contracts had to I don't know if it close or expire, because there was now no supply. So there was frantic reactions from different quarters. I was in BPC at that time, and we relied on something like 80% of our supply from Eskom. And on one particular date, that power was not there. The BPC was not innocent of this, because they were supposed to also have taken their own actions to try and combat what was oncoming. But they still believed that Eskom still had surplus to supply us until that day. So having experienced now the painful experience of load shedding after that date, a lot of utilities went back into locking bilaterals again. There was no chance for long-term bilaterals because there was no supply, but they ended up with many short-term bilaterals. The countries like Botswana, which had no supply of their own, ended up with a short-term bilateral from DRC, short-term bilateral from ZESCO, short-term bilateral from Mozambique, and from everywhere. And then some non-firm contracts from all over. So that experience was painful for many. I'm just giving an example of BPs, but it happened in Zimbabwe, it happened in Namibia, it happened in many other places. So that experience of most players in the same market today is what is one of those factors that are actually not making people make proper decisions of going into the market and having confidence in the market. So the market is now slow. And of course, the market is also controlled by national utilities like Hans said. So I think there has to be an effort, deliberate effort, in the market to change mindsets to try and develop the market itself to a higher level than it is now. So yes, the experiences could actually be contributory.
Sorry, we cannot hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
I wonder. Yes, thank you very much. I was just saying thank you, Mr. Lomo, for those insightful comments, and Hans, thank you for that lovely presentation. Of course, if there are any further questions, please do drop them in the Q&A section, and if you have any thoughts, please do throw them in the chat. It's open, and we'll address those as we go on with our presentation. Sorry. And at this point, I will call upon our next presenter, who is Longo Chela here, our trading manager at Greenco. And Longo essentially drives Greenco's innovative regional energy trading initiatives. And he joined Greenco pretty much in the early stages and played a significant role in developing the firm's trading systems and capabilities. He has been pretty much hands-on and has been key in our trading and operations here at Greenco. And so before joining Greenco, Longo has built a foundation in the mining sector, getting valuable experience in power systems, maintenance, and operations. And outside of that, of course, he has built competencies in finance, energy policy, as well as emerging and renewable energy technologies. Without further ado, I think that should be his presentation coming on now. And so without taking too much of your time, I'll call upon Longo to take us through this presentation on the making of the trading desk. And yeah, thank you very much. Over to you, Longo.
Thanks, Joseph. That's a very flattering account. When I first joined at Greenco, actually, Lovemore was one of the people I found. And so it's a really pleasure today to share and speak with him. And he has already shared quite a bit on the background on the power markets in the region, how they evolved. And of course, Hans did give the international perspective about how to develop energy markets and the intricacies involved in that. So I'm picking it up, just sharing our experience as Greenco in setting up a trading desk and what trading means to us. Of course, many of the utilities were trading way before Greenco, and some of the elements are familiar with them. So just sharing here from our vantage point as Greenco. I'll start, first of all, by just giving an introduction to Greenco and really speaking to Energy Trading 101. What is energy trading? I'll speak to how exactly you build a trading desk and some of the elements around what traders do and the value they create in the regional ESI. So Africa Greenco is a creditworthy intermediary buyer of renewable energy that effectively provides reliable and affordable renewable energy to utilities, municipalities, large power consumers, and also provide flexible supply solutions. So we're a trader on the South African Power Pool. We were actually the first pure trader to be granted membership, which we are very grateful to our partners, the national utility here in Zambia, as well as SAP, who facilitated our engagement on the market. So our business model relies on our relationship with both the regional power exchange, SAP, as well as the national utilities in which we operate. Greenco is also a diversifier of risk across a growing portfolio of supply and demand effectively we're an operational aggregator, aggregating multiple supply and being able to offtake that. But primarily, this element of bankable offtake that is the space that Greenco comes in to fill, and be able to provide bankable offtake for renewable energy projects. These are some of our notable milestones since inception. So over $100 million of liquidity support committed. We're the first pure energy trader admitted on the SAP, like I said. We have just under 10 gigawatts of regional IPP pipeline, over 100 megawatts of PPA signed. Across the region, we have over 30 skilled international staff, including 7 team members in our trading desk, which I'll speak to in a moment. We've secured $1 million of grant funding for a BESS feasibility study to look into innovative technologies around battery storage, as well as $250,000 of grant funding for green hydrogen. To date, we have traded just over 1 terawatt hour of power. So our first trade was on the 3rd of August, 2022. A bit of a fun fact, I recall when Lovemore was there in the beginning. I just joined. A few months later, I had the joy of, like a year or so later, the joy of trading on my birthday. So that's how I can't forget the first day we traded. But it's been really a remarkable journey, partnering with many utilities as well as SAP to enable the innovations that Greenco is currently doing. So this is our regional footprint. We're active in Zambia, where we have our regional HQ, and where we incorporated. We're also fully licensed, as well as where our first PPA for 25 megawatt solar PV plant has been signed. We're also present in Zimbabwe, where some similar arrangements have been made, as well as South Africa, Namibia, and we're expanding into the DRC and other future markets, as you can tell from the diagram. Now, on to energy trading 101. So energy trading is really this complex element of effectively moving the commodity that is electricity in this particular respect, generation, transmission, distribution, and there are various elements that are involved. I'll run through some of the key ideas and elements that could often be involved in energy trading. One is schedules. And so as Hans and Lovemore pointed out, when energy is produced, it must be consumed immediately, and therefore there is need to ensure that there's a match between supply and demand. That what has been produced is what will be consumed, and therefore there are schedules sent that are shared across the value chain. So in this case, say with the transmission system operator, to say that this is the power that is going to be consumed at such and such a time. And so there is this adherence to communicate what amount of electricity will be transmitted, generated, or consumed at a specific time in the future. Usually shared via Excel files, via email, or other platforms. Balancing, this is the process of ensuring effectively that the electricity supplied always matches demand in real time. That is, that the supply that is coming onto the grid and the consumption is always matching. And so you have the system operator that is playing a role here to ensure that the system is always in balance. Failure to which you often have an imbalance and frequencies affected, and adversely you could see elements of as serious as a blackout coming to the fore. Another important concept is that of time of use. That is that electricity rates vary based on time of day. This is driven largely by demand and supply. And so in most power markets, such as the SAP, for example, where we trade, there's off-peak, standard, and peak. And so off-peak typically being hour ending 23 to 6 a.m. in the morning. And then you have standard hour, usually there's a solar hours for the most part for simplicity. And then you have peak hours, which tend to be the highest priced hours. Then as regards trading itself, beyond being able to engage in the market, there are often elements that you must engage to capture the trades that you are actually completing on the market into a system. This is called an ETRM system. I shall come to that in a moment. However, one key input into the ETRM is what's called forward curves. That is hourly time series that forecast prices and costs. And so when we trade power, we often want to have a view of what prices or volumes we may trade in the future. And that will help us also manage exposure and various risks that may be involved when we trade. And so these are power forward curves. Something related is power quantities, which is a corollary of forward curves, except power quantities are not prices, but quantities for the future. The next slide just shows the power value chain, energy value chain, that across time you have generation, transmission, and in some cases you could have storage, you could have distribution, and ultimately consumption. And traders play a key role across this value chain to be able to add value. There was a question earlier about liquidity and market liquidity. Traders play a key role in this to improve liquidity. In the case of green coal, to enable bankable offtake, as well as now when we're experiencing critical constraints in terms of generation as well as transmission capacity. Traders are often a key actor in enabling innovative trading products for the needs of the supply industry. Coming to the trading desk, what is a trading desk? A trading desk is really your full setup that enables energy trading to take place. So it often involves the technology as well as the functional areas and the skills to make this happen. In many modern trading desks, you see a setup such as this one, where you have front office, mid office, and back office functions. Your front office function will typically be involved in trade execution, and that's engaging in the market to complete trades. Bid creation in this particular respect will be in here. So the trader as regards front office would be in charge of ensuring that the correct bid is placed in the market and that the envisaged outcomes are actually realized. Another function is deal capture, which is effectively how we manage the deals once they've been transacted on an energy trading and risk management system. And I shall speak to that shortly. You recall I mentioned scheduling, and so the front office will typically be responsible for this. You also have middle office, where you have risk management, market analytics, where you need to be able to understand where the market is coming from, where the market is, and where the market is going. And so market analytics would really have a wide horizon view of what's pertaining on the market, capture insights that are emerging in the market for optimum decision making. You also have P&L and position management in the event that you have exposures where you trade and you have an exposure, an open position or a closed position, as well as back office, which is pretty much the function that deals with what happens once power has been delivered. And so elements of reconciliation, because your delivered energy may be different from your scheduled energy. And so this may vary in that respect. You also have settlement, invoicing, confirmation. And so these are typical functions that would be functions that you see across the trading desk functional areas. And so onto the green code trading desk itself, we have a philosophy around how we trade and our approach to trading. So beyond being able to create bids and engage in a particular market and transact, we also look at robust and precision trading that's supported by seamless procedures and workflows. So to put in perspective, you can imagine how there could be multiple products on a particular market. And so, for example, the South African power pool has multiple markets. So you have the competitive market. So there's a day-ahead market where we engage. And there are forward physical markets where you trade a day ahead. That's the day-ahead market, or a month ahead, a week ahead. And there are experts that may speak on that on SAP. Merely speaking from the perspective of a participant. So in this respect, you will have trades that you may complete on those markets, and you need to be able to capture with precision the volumes and the prices, and be able to manage that transaction end to end. So imagine you make a trade on the day ahead market, and assuming that's going to a client, and you may have looked in a PPA to supply a client for a particular period, and that power is partly being furnished by the day ahead market. You need to be able to capture that deal in a system, which I shall speak to in a moment. And so you really need this precision platform, in this case, an ETRM system that's able to manage your transaction end to end. So Greenco has, since inception, set up a trading desk where we have skilled personnel with various competencies aligned with to achieve on the market. Then the second element is the trading system. So Greenco has invested in an ETRM system, or an energy trading risk management system, which is effectively an end-to-end platform for the processing of deals. And so we're able to effectively manage a trade end-to-end from the moment that it is before it's traded, to when it's traded, to when it's delivered, to when settlement takes place, and you're able to manage seamlessly each of these elements. Another key element of trading is being able to ensure that you control all of the risk involved, both operational risk as well as market risk and other risk. And so you have a number of procedures and workflows that ensure, first of all, that you are able to prevent mistakes that could be operational in nature and prevent operational risk, as well as capture any market risk. As you know, these are dynamic markets, and so prices could move up and down, subject demand and supply, as well as other factors, both on an intraday perspective as well as a more long-term perspective, across the month, across the year. And so there are trends across these different timeframes. And so this is Greenco's approach to energy trading. On the next slide is just some of the architecture of the ETRM system. So to put it in perspective, imagine you're transacting for 25 years in a normal PPA. PPA would typically be 20-25 years. You have a power quantity effectively for each hour of those 25 years. So that's every hour for each day, for 365 days, for 870,000 hours in a year, and that's over 250,000 hours in 20 years. So you need to be able to capture each and every parameter of the various elements involved in trading. So in this case, it could be the market clearing price, as well as the different costs, such as wheeling, which would be the cost of moving power from one end to another endpoint, as well as different fees. It could be balancing that is involved. So that's a trade that have so many commercial attributes that you would need a system to be able to keep track of each of those and be able to seamlessly monitor end-to-end what product that is, as well as at a glance be able to furnish information like profit and loss, mark-to-market exposures, and any other information. So the ETM system in this case helps that. So it's a standard practice in many modern markets, and even in the region, incorporate. So how do we now engage the market? What guides how we engage on a power exchange? For example, we are members of the power exchange. What does that look like? And so before you hear the trading process, a simplified trading process for potentially, say, the day-ahead market, which is the market for power being delivered the next day. So in one case, you could have power being delivered the next day and gate closures at 12 hours. Power starts, delivery of power starts midnight the next day. And so before, you'd have a pre-trade analysis, you'd have a bid submission that follows next, and market clearing. Then you'd have a deal capture where you move your information to the ETM system. There may be some element of deal confirmation and matching where you coordinate with your counterparts or your market operator to get a confirmation that the trades that you have understood are indeed all information is as per market clearing price, or indeed whatever trade that you may have entered bilaterally or otherwise. There could be an element of nomination to the TSO. That is how you alert the TSO that a certain quantum of power will be injected into the system. So this enables the TSO to be able to balance demand and supply. Typically, you do have an end of day P&L risk management report or process that ensures that the end of day trades actually subscribe to what's expected. You actually see risk management also playing a role across the trading process, even before a bid is actually made on the system. And typically, invoicing and settlement may follow, where any trades that may have been engaged on indeed are invoiced and settled. So that is that the financial settlements takes place. And there are different markets that give rise to different ways of settlement. And then oftentimes you also have some amount of reporting and analysis. However, this is just a snapshot. Some products can be more complex than others. So the next slide just goes to speak to some workflows and procedures. And oftentimes you have a relationship between different functional areas. And so you need to be able to ensure that, first of all, data integrity and operational excellence are maintained. And so this snapshot from one of our processes, which just shows flow of processes across different functions. And so we may look at whether a trade has been completed, what's the flow, also elements here that link to KYC as well as credit limits and the like. So Greenco has sought to borrow the best practice as regards workflows, procedures, and risk management, and we've been able to maintain some level of operational excellence that may speak about a different platform. What you see next is just a high-level overview of some of the different intricate pieces that may be involved in a trading process. And so there could be some interaction with weather data and forecasting, where for your scheduling and your bidding process, you may take into account weather data and irradiation data that will inform your bidding strategy and your engagement with the market. There will be some tools that you will use to extract data from your different primary sources, be it your bilateral agreements, different information that comes from your power exchange, such as SAP, to be able to make to and what you may call an edible data input for your ETRM system. There's some amount of automation with file storage, scheduling potentially, as well as interaction with your ETRM system. So these are some of the specific trading approaches that we implement at Greencore. Then just to close off the session, just want to take a step back to what traders offer to the regional market. What that market. So there are key requirements to value. We do think that there has to be a certain level of operational excellence, where operational trading team are required to execute based on particular best practice systems and workflows that ensure that there are guardrails both for operational risk as well as market risk. We have seen the impact of either rogue traders or improper behavior on markets, and in many power exchanges, you also have a market surveillance team that ensure that members are acting in the best interest of the power exchange. But here the point is just to underscore that there's a certain level of operational excellence that is required to be able to add value. You also see some aspect of operational integration. And so there's daily communication with TSOs. This is really picking from our experience as Greencore, where we need to engage seamlessly and constantly with, for instance, the TSO, engagement with policymakers and regulators to ensure new market structures or take into account upcoming trends or trends that may be emerging. Another element that you see, particularly with the emergence of Greencore, is this unlocking of the financial close dilemma. That is the fact that traders can play an off-taker role to help mitigate risk and offer bankable PPAs and offtake. So that's really the role that Greencore does come into fill. And we're also seeing a move away from some structures to more escrow accounts, allowing for more dynamic market. We have also seen this trend where we're looking at the supply and demand more from an aggregator perspective. And so we have a trade book and portfolio approach where there's a building of supply and demand and efficient allocation of resources. The second point that just speaks to the fact that there's a decoupling between generation assets, generation and assets from offering to demand clients. So we see traders being able to add value in between generation and consumption. Another key element and a key front is this element of risk, that a player can be able to aggregate risk that may not be otherwise fully mitigated, but through proper risk management, traders can identify and be able to mitigate particular risks and be able to add value to the regional ESI. So what are some solutions that traders can allow? Specific to Greencore, traders can offer market access. So be able to provide market access to for both deficit and excess power. And so traders could be able to aggregate much smaller amounts, much smaller quantum of generation, be able to supply on the market where it's not possible for that particular player. Traders could be also be able, in the case of Greencore, be able to also sell excess power that clients may have onto the power exchange. Another element I did allude to is this element of bankable offtake, that in the case of Greencore, being able to unlock investments into renewable energy, as well as effectively offering bankable offtake through the Greencore business model, where we effectively pull and aggregate supply and demand, as well as offer a bankable PPAs to our clients. There's often also need for flexible supply, where clients may prefer shorter tenures than your conventional PPAs that run longer term. A client may require a month of supply or a few days of supply, or just time of use of particular blocks. So traders are able to in the crevice of that and be able to offer value. Ultimately, for Greencore, we believe really in flexibility, service, and affordability, that we have the customer-centric approach in being able to offer term solutions and custom profiles, as well as firm or non-firm power. And emerging now is an element of green energy certificates and the market that's arising from that, and the opportunities that are arising in that respect. So this is a space that traders such as Greencore are engaging in to be able to provide value for the region's energy supply industry. So I'll end at this point and just potentially hand over to for questions. If any questions at this point, either for myself or indeed the previous speakers. Thank you.
You're on mute again. So you're on mute, yeah. We can.
You're on mute. We can't hear you.
Can you hear me now, Hen?
Yes, we can hear now.
Yeah. Yes, thank you very much, Longo, for that lovely presentation and for taking us through the important role that traders are playing, especially with the evolving landscape right now. And so we are going to dive into the questions. So I'm only able to see one, which is, I think, more directed at you, Longo. That's with regards to how do you create forward curves when there is no market? And do you rely solely on your own analysis, or do you create external sources as well? I'm not sure if you're able to see that in the chart.
Thanks, Jeho. Yeah, thanks, Josephat. And thank you for that question, Merek. So just to take a step back, typically in power trading, as you have noted, you often need to have forward curves, which is effectively time series of prices, of effectively just forecasted prices for the future that you would input into the ETM and also help you for decision making. Depending on the market they're engaging in, for example, South African Power Pool, you do have historical data. So there is, first of all, a market. For example, the day-ahead market is one basis. So there are a number of inputs, without going into much detail, the number of inputs that could inform your estimation of what you feel the future prices will be like. And of course, it's both art and science. And so there are a number of tools that have also been built by the team internally here at Greencore, as well as the help of consultants, to determine to take a view on where we think the market is going based on different touch points or levers So historical prices being one of them, but then also key trends that are emerging would determine what could be the price on a week ahead basis, what could be the price on a month ahead basis. So we do indeed rely on analysis as well as different coefficients that speak to external factors as well. Hope that answers your question, Merrick, and thanks for asking.
Thanks, Longo. Just checking again to see if my having any technical issues. You can get me clearly. Okay. Thank you so much for that. Hans, would you like to share some thoughts or comments?
Yeah, no, but again, I think this is a great presentation of how you need to think as a trader. I think independent on, or dependent actually, no, sorry, dependent on which kind of market participant you are, you need to kind of develop skills on how you trade and how you are going to, let's say, position yourself the best way you can in both the national and regional markets. Yeah.
Great, thank you. Mr. Lovemore, any thoughts on the role that traders are playing with the evolving electricity market at the moment?
Yes. Well, I can only have positive words because I'm part of the first trader to be a member of SAP. So yes, we fought very hard for Africa Green Co to become a member of SAP as the first trader. And we did that because we knew the value that we were bringing into the market. And just to be confirmed, if I may put it that way, there is now a number of traders in other parts of the region which are now seeking membership. And actually the trader role is growing in many countries now, to be able to interpose themselves between the traditional suppliers and the consumers. And of course, the different market structures that are coming up in Namibia, for example, we've got the modified single buyer, and now there's space for traders to come in. Then they've made provision for traders in all their rules and regulations for that to happen. And we hope there will be a lot of them coming in there. South Africa is an open ocean, if you ask me. There's been lots of things happening in South Africa, traders wanting to come into the market. There's been legal regulatory tussles, but the regulators getting over that. And that just testifies that there's a role that traders are perceived to play in the market, which can only be positive. So yes, still small numbers and small volumes, but we expect them to grow, and we expect the value to actually increase both to the suppliers and to the buyers. And Africa Green Co, thank you for being the first one.
Great. Thanks a lot, boys. Really pleasure being part of the Green Co team. At this point, would call for any questions from the audience. If you have any questions, you can throw them in the Q&A section, and we are wrapping up.
Yeah, maybe a short one from me to you, because I've been texting with the Keith, and I know he's been pulled into his board meeting. So, but if you want to, as I have, and he has asked me if I could to present his presentation, because again, I've been part of developing the market code in South Africa, so I know it rather well as well.
Yeah, that was a fine, thank you.
Yeah.
Not sure if you have the presentation or if you'd like me to share it.
Yeah, I have my presentation. I have his presentation. So yeah, you just need to try to imagine that you see Keith and not me. So Let me see. Yeah.
The century is apologies.
Yeah. Yeah. So again, I'll do a brief presentation. I think maybe the key thing for this audience is again also to focus a bit on the way that this is going to be interfaced with EAPP. Sorry. So this is kind of a high level overview of what is then called in the South African context, the multi-market model. So this is essentially where you have some key players, as you can see on the top. You got all the, let's say, the generators, so the Eskom generation. You got the IPPs, and you got our traders. And then likewise in the bottom part, you will have the retailers and consumers. So again, which is kind of fairly simple. If you then look at how this is now going to be managed within South Africa, it becomes a bit more, let's say, complex in the sense that there are some unbundling in a sense that has happened with the NTCSA. So the National Transmission Company of South Africa was created, I think, 1st of July last year, where essentially what you can see as part of the dotted line in this drawing was established as a separate entity, let's say, outside of the old Eskom, if I can call it that. So Eskom generation and distribution is then kept as part of the old Eskom. While the NTCSA is focusing then much more, or solely, I would say, on the regulated part of the network. So you can see here that to the left, I'll put on my laser pointer, so you can see the network operation. So again, they are the network operator for transmission, so they own the transmission network and operate this. They are also then the system operator, right, of the interconnected, let's say, transmission system. And they will then be responsible then, of course, of the network operation, the more technical operation, maintenance, etc. But they will also then be responsible for the second-to-second balancing and being supported by both the balancing market as well as various kinds of ancillary services. So this is kind of a traditional transmission system operator role that they are playing here. And then in the middle, you can see that we will have the market operator that will operate from the outset for different markets. So they will have a day-ahead energy market. And without going into huge details, they will have then a co-optimized market where they will solve the requirement for day-ahead energy. So again, trying to balance the system energy-wise, but at the same time, they will have a day-ahead reserve. So this is kind of what is in literature is then defined as a co-optimized solution where you are providing the system operator with the requirement reserves at the day-ahead stage at the same time as you solve the energy balance day ahead using the same bids and offers from the market participants, again in the combined calculation. And after this, you will then run 6 auctions for intraday energy. So this is again allowing you to let's say change your position to the market kind of closer to real time, because of course, as we all know, even though that you have good systems, what you plan to do one day ahead might not really happen at the during real time. So this is again where you are allowed to adjust your volumes, not the prices actually, but the volumes. So you are allowed to then say what your output is going to be changed to, but you are essentially not allowed to do a full rebidding with different prices. And the last piece of the puzzle is that you then also offer a balancing mechanism, or let's say a simplified balancing market to be utilized by the system operator during real-time operation. So this is essentially then balancing or units that are available after you've cleared all the other markets that could be utilized by the system operator for balancing. And it is kind of a pricing mechanism for this, so I'll go through the briefly kind of in the next couple of slides. And then again, answering a bit to actually one of the questions that came in my sessions, then how do you manage kind of existing contracts? And the way that this has been solved or proposed to be solved in South Africa is by having what is called the central purchasing agency. And this has, let's say, several, let's say, tasks that will be performed by this. The easiest one is that for all of you that know South Africa, you know that there has been several renewable IPP auctions where essentially people have been bidding and gotten longer-term bilateral longer-term PPAs to supply into the grid with an agreed price and volume. And this is kind of what is referred to in the language of South Africa as Section 34 IPPs. So again, these are contracts that have been entered into by the South African, let's say, government, and it was decided from a long time ago that Eskom will be the off-taker. These will then be managed by the central purchasing agency, by them being the financial counterpart to this. So again, these IPPs will have to provide a forecast of their output. This will be sold in the market, and essentially it's the CPA that will keep the IPPs whole, in the sense that if their IPP price is 700, if they get the price from the market of 500, then the CPA will make sure that they get the additional 200. Vice versa, if the price then ends up as 1,000, again, then the CPA will claw back the 300 on that was higher than the PPA price. So that is maybe the simplest part of the CPA. We'll be managing this on behalf of let's say, both the IPPs and essentially being the financial counterpart for those contracts. And then a more complex part is that they will be managing all the old Eskom generation power stations, as well as supporting Eskom distribution and other licensed distributors or to maintain the wholesale tariff or the energy tariff over a transitional period. So maybe I will actually jump to it because we have a nice drawing of this that makes it easier. So again, kind of, we now have a regulated phase, right? The market hopefully opens by 1st of April 2026. This is the target date where essentially everything is regulated. What happens by the CPA is that for Eskom generation, as well as Eskom distribution, they will have contracts with the CPA, again for generation for all the 25 power stations, an individual contract. And likewise, Eskom distribution will have one on the offtake side, and they will then essentially having a energy hedge. This becomes now a bit complex. But again, essentially the key here is that the Eskom generation power station will be bid into the market, and essentially with a setup of a hedge, energy hedge and a capacity payment, they will be made whole in the sense that they will, if I can say it like this, survive in the market. So they'll be paid both the long-term cost and the short-term cost, but will not be allowed to keep any profit from the trade. And this is again a volume that will decline over time. So again, over time, both Eskom generation power stations will need to compete, say, freely in the market. Likewise, the Eskom distribution over time will also then have to procure their power based on market prices. But again, this is a 5-year transitional period. This is also part of this Energy Regulation Act amendment bill that was passed this new year. That is going to be a transitional phase where these contracts will be in place. Again, this kind of requires, to be honest, a long presentation and discussion with examples to fully understand. But again, that is kind of the key thing, is that the CPA is essentially trying to cover for all the non-market based kind of transactions that will happen in South Africa. But at the same time, kind of supporting the market. So again, referring back to the question there I got in my session, is that these legacy contracts, they are not allowed to be traded kind of fully or continue to exist outside of the market. Their volumes are now going to go into the market and be part of the merit order, but the CPA will then provide them with a financial security. And if you look at kind of the day-ahead market, it works like most other day-ahead markets. So again, not very different from, for instance, SAPP, where you have the supply curve and the demand curve, and when it intersects, you find the price. The major difference is that these bids are, let's say, also including several technical parameters. So again, it will be based on the capabilities of the power stations to generate. So you got a lot more technical parameters. You are not only bidding a price and a volume like you do in SAPP, but actually have to provide more technical capabilities of your units, because again, with the co-optimization, you are now trying to figure out what you need and what you can use for both energy and reserves in the co-optimized setup. And again, this will set an unconstrained price, which is actually what you are going to get paid. But of course, there could be constraints in the network, and thereby, if there are constraints and you are essentially backed off the system because due to the constraint you cannot produce, you will get a loss of profit compensation for that. So that essentially you are kept whole as a market participant. And then maybe the last thing that I will focus on in this presentation is how will SAWEM, which is the South African wholesale energy market, and SAPP be integrated. And I think this will be a huge benefit for SAPP, the way that we have designed this. So the key is that we would expect, which is actually the most efficient, at least for based on pure economics, is that all the market participants in South Africa bid into the national South African market, and the market will create what is called the net export curve. And that is essentially, as you can see, the difference between local aggregated supply and demand curves. So you can see the explanation here. You got kind of the local price cost, and then you create a net export curve where kind of this is kind of the intersection between demand and supply. And then you will say that if I can get power cheaper from the region than I have done in my let's say local optimization, I will then start to import or buy from from SAPP. And likewise, if there are people willing to pay for my power, my additional power in the region, I will then start to export. And it will kind of move around the sensitivity of the system marginal cost calculated in South Africa. So again, this means that every day, every hour, you will see a curve, an order coming from South Africa, saying that we would like to buy if the prices are this low, and we will sell if the prices, somebody is willing to pay a higher price. And this will then go back into the South African market. So again, you offer this net export curve to SAPP, and the result, if somebody is then willing to sell to South Africa or to buy from South Africa, the result of this, of the SAP, let's say, market result will go into a new updated calculation within South Africa, where the imports and export are then taken into account in the national market, and thereby creating, let's say, an optimal result for both SAPP, but also for the South African wholesale market. And there is nothing in the rules of South Africa today that stops. Let's use now Greenco as an example, because you got the trading license in South Africa, as well as a license to trade in SAP. You could also trade directly in SAPP, but then you have the problem that you need to decide now where you want to take your power, either to South Africa or to SAPP yourself. By this implementation that is proposed for South Africa, you will get the best outcome, let's say, solved by the South African market operator. So we'll either use it nationally or regionally based on your price and the willingness of people to buy or sell. So in that sense, it will again ensure the optimal solution without you having to decide, shall I offer my megawatts in South Africa or in SAPP? So we think this is actually a very good integrated solution to ensure that we are not creating an unwanted or unnecessary arbitrage or risk on foreign market participants that have something to buy or sell in South Africa, but want to, let's say, be exposed to what is happening in SAPP and take advantage of that as well. So again, it's an let's say, a complex solution for the market operator, or more complex solution for the market operator, but again, a huge benefit for anybody who wants to trade in this market. And by the way, this is very similar to how, again, the integrated energy markets in Europe is working, where we got, I don't know, 15 different market operators, but they are using the same algorithm to solve the regional or the cross-border flows. And it's working kind of to a certain extent the same way as this, where everybody is aggregating their national demand and supply curve with the exactly same mechanics as this, and then are trying to utilize the cross-border opportunities through a common market and a common algorithm. And then again, I don't think I'll go through this. I think the key here, as I said, is that you will get the result. You'll bid once into the South African market. That bid will be used based on your technical capabilities to both ensuring that you get or depending on your prices, that you get the day-ahead position. So again, something to buy or sell. You will then use the same in the intraday auctions, depending on your, let's say, re-declaration, where you can go up or down, or if suddenly the system needs more power, for instance, then they will use the cheapest order that wasn't used in the day-ahead optimization. And likewise, the same will be used for the balancing mechanism. So again, it's in a certain sense, it's a simpler market for market participants, where you are essentially bidding once with a set of volume, prices, and technical capabilities, and where essentially the market operator supported and supporting the system operator will use those orders to solve a balance at day ahead, intraday, and balancing time frame. And there is kind of a pricing mechanism for all of this. So I will not go into any detail of this. Those very interested, the market code is published, so you can review this. Yes. So I think I talked about this. I think again, one of the key discussions in South Africa is, of course, how the wholesale tariff will look in the future. So you can see to the left, kind of it's a very simplified revenue allocation methodology used by NERSA today. There will be an interim one that is going to be implemented, which at least tries to again differentiate between the different kind of services that you are offering, especially now with an unbundled setup. And then you can see on the possible final structure, where we are essentially getting a diversified or a multiple tariff structure to show kind of what are you paying for capacity, what are you paying for energy, what is a potential subsidy part that you are paying, what is legacy, which is essentially covering for the cost of the CPA, what is ancillary services. So again, what is the cost of allowing the system operator to keep the system safe, and what are the use of system charges. So again, the use of the transmission and distribution network. And again, this is kind of, I would say, kind of the ultimate goal, where we have a proper unbundled tariff, so that everybody, you and me, that are living in South Africa, know exactly what to pay for which services, which will then allow for also better integration of off-grid solutions or partly off-grid solutions and prosumer solutions in the future, so that everything is done in a let's say possible or in the most kind of correct manner. And this is the roadmap. So we are somewhere down here. The market code has gone through various consultation workshops. So for those who are interested, all of these workshops are available online on the NTCSA website, both the presentations and recordings of all of these. So somebody has gone tired of Netflix, you can rather sit the whole weekend and look at consultation workshops. But again, the whole idea here is that we will then, the process now is that the NERSA need to approve a market operation license for the NTCSA targeting April this year. Then they will approve the market code that has been developed by the system or the market operator according to what has been or what is the requirement in the amendment bill. These vesting contracts or the contracts with Eskom generation and distribution needs to be finalized and approved. They are already in a draft version. We will then have training platforms and simulations developed. So again, to support the market participants, wholesale tariff regulation needs to be approved, system development for the platforms need to be done, agreements for balancing and market participation. So again, we need people to sign off to this market. A platform for bilateral hedging needs to be established either by the market operator or maybe hopefully somebody else is picking that up. Capacity market, which is something we didn't talk about, but is something that should be part of the future, let's say, enduring solution. And then the market launch in April 2026, where again, this, as we saw from the schematics, that there will be a 5-year transitional period until, let's say, everybody is left in the market. Okay, I think that's more or less it. I shouldn't say I hope I made Keith proud, but I hope you got at least the gist of this, of how the South African market will develop from now and into the future. So I'll stop there and maybe take some questions if there are any questions.
And thank you so much for that in-depth presentation. It's almost as if it was Keith the entire time. Just trying to see if we have questions from the chat before we go to the Q&A. There's one on day-ahead reserves. If you could kindly explain on day-ahead reserves as asked by Mbarashe.
Yeah, so day-ahead reserves is essentially what the system operator will. So I'll go back here. Is what the system operator needs. So this is kind of almost like a capacity payment, right? So the system operator needs to have certain kind of let's say primary, secondary, and tertiary reserves available if he or she needs it. So that is what you are then essentially buying from the market as well. So this is typically flexible power stations that can offer this and allow you to to reserve essentially. So in the day-ahead energy, you are now committing power plants to generate and consumers to consume. In the reserve, you are keeping something again as reserves for the system operator, so that if they need to intervene with the market due to kind of something happening, then they will have some reserves to call upon. So the day-ahead reserves are for the system operator.
Great, thanks for that. And just seeing another question that just popped up here, that was when would we potentially expect the full integration between South and the East African power pool?
Yeah, that is a very good question. Ideally, this is now a process. So I know there are established working groups between SAPP and EAPP that have already started looking into that. And there has been site visits going back and forth. So the ideal situation is that they have decided how to also integrate their markets or couple their markets at the same time as the interconnector Zambia-Tanzania is ready. So we don't get a suboptimal, let's say, solution in between until they have been able to couple. But I think the good thing is now that EAPP has really picked up pace, so that hopefully now within a few months, there will be a market also in Eastern Africa. And then, of course, it's a lot easier to look at coupling when essentially both markets are there, right?
Yeah, we'll certainly keep an eye on that one. I think there's one on capacity building for trading. Isn't long, that might be directed this year. What provisions have been put in place to build capacity building in trading?
Yeah, so the slide I showed earlier with this kind of options on coupling is from a project that was run actually now 5 years ago, where there was a big both technical and market, let's say, he looked at both the technical cooperation and also the market cooperation between the two pools. And again, of course, this hasn't been, I was part of that, so we gave some recommendations and some things that needs to be looked at. But again, now it's up to SAPP and EAPP to really go into this and agree on how they are essentially going to couple, because there are many ways they can do it. Again, the sooner they agree, I would probably say that the better the outcome will be, because then both themselves can then prepare, but also, of course, everybody who's interested in what will happen trading wise when the flow starts coming from the north essentially to Southern Africa.
Yeah, thanks. Longo, would you like to chip in on that one?
Thanks, Joe. Yeah, I think like Hans pointed out, I think there are, first of all, Africa, the SADC region is really in a nascent stage in terms of powerful development. So there's definitely need for capacity. I do know the various players are doing their role. I do know that SAP does train its traders. I think there are players, I think speaking to what's going on in the SA development, like Keith and Hans have. And also there's this webinar. So but I'm not sure that was referring to the broader context of the industry or as Greencore, but yeah, you can be rest assured speaking to us as Greencore that we are always on the lookout and always looking to see what can add most value to the ESI as regards trading and how that evolves. So suffice to say that I think we're still at a very nascent stage in energy markets. I think there's a lot of work and room to grow. And so yeah, we're looking to engage when the time comes. Thanks, Jeho.
Audible. Yeah, I think that's pretty much all of our questions. We still love more. Would like to add something?
Well, not really, but just like everybody has said, the two power pools are at different stages of development. East Africa is.
If you try to speak, I think you might be muted.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Yeah.
Okay. Now, I was just saying the two power pools are at different stages of development. Can you hear me, Joe?
Yeah, I'm just going to take you on speaker. That's a question, I believe.
Yeah, looks like you can't hear me.
Hi, Teddy, how are you doing? You can hear me. Teddy, you have a question? Mic is muted.
I think it might be an issue on your side in Zambia. because I could hear low more. So
My one was muted.
no,
Yes.
no, no. I
Means
think you
can't
cannot hear
see
us.
either.
No, no, you cannot hear anybody else.
I can do it. Okay. Okay. Felix has his hand up, but Mr. Lovemore, any comments from?
Okay, Jeho. What I was saying is the two power pools are at different levels of development. Of course, SAP being more advanced because it's been operating for a long time. SAP, I mean, EAPP is just coming up, and they are on arrangements for capacity building. First of all, to be able to run their own power pool because they haven't run a power pool before. So they have been going through some capacity building exercises, some of which I know about because I've been involved. And so they are coming up to a level. I think they should be given a chance to be able, first of all, to integrate their system, operate it as a power pool and the market on their own before they can couple with the Southern Africa. Although I know very well that they will not be given a long chance to do that because Southern Africa is in short supply of power and there's surplus in Eastern Africa, and they want to get that power as quickly as possible. But there will be a need definitely to make sure that everybody is properly prepared to couple these markets and run them smoothly. Because if you don't do it properly, we may end up with even bigger blackouts than we have experienced at regional level, because this will be interregional integration. So there will be need, I'm sure Hans will be involved, and there may be a few other people in preparation. What they have done though, is they have identified the needs for what they need to be trained on, especially, for example, they have the synchronization program. They need to be trained to be able to synchronize on a certain date. They have to go through the whole process of doing that. And of course, when they've coupled, they've stabilized the system, then they need to be trained on how to run the market and coupling the markets properly. And so they will have to be a deliberate program prepared jointly between them and SAP. What I know is there's a structure already where they meet jointly to prepare for this. But of course, we are talking of 27, 28 before it actually happens. So maybe there's still time for them to be prepared.
Yeah, great. Thanks for those thoughts, Mr. Lovemore. Hans, just to check, I'm seeing you have your hand up.
Yeah, I think I was also said Teddy is still got his hand up, but just what I wanted to say is that maybe at the last status of EAPP, as I said, I'm the project manager for this, so I can report that, and some of you might have seen on LinkedIn, is that actually the site acceptance test and the certification of the first batch of traders was finished last week. So they are moving ahead. And of course, as Lovemore say, kind of they don't have the benefit of SAPP that now have 10 years of experience, but they are catching up fast. So again, I think that is kind of in progress, let's say, for them to be prepared.
Thanks for that addition. Not sure if we have any more questions, but I still do see Tendy's hand up. Not sure what the question might be, but please do feel free to send through your questions even after the webinar. We'll be able to respond to those whenever we yes, in case there are any other outstanding issues that you'd like us to address or speak to, please do feel free to reach out. And as mentioned earlier, we are available on our YouTube channel, and you can be able to go back to those. But perhaps I would like to ask if there are any last thoughts or closing remarks from you, Hans. as we are wrapping up our event?
No, but nothing special. But again, feel free to reach out through the Green Call or directly if you want to, if you have some questions regarding what we have said.
Good, thank you. So a lot more.
Not really. I'm an insider in Green Core, so I'm available to you anytime.
Sure thing. And again, the emphasis is if you have any follow-up questions, please do send those through and we'll be able to get in touch and see how we can further elaborate on those some of those issues. Longo, any closing remarks from you?
Thanks, Jeho. I think it's a thorough pleasure to have joined this webinar. Thanks for all 100 plus that were able to join. We remain at your disposal. Should have any follow-up questions like Jeho mentioned. So thank you so much for joining, and thanks once again to Hans and Lovemo and Keith, whose time is incredibly valuable. So I can imagine the 1,000 things you'd be doing, Keith and Lovemo, but you were able to join us. So many thanks from my side. Thank you.
Great, thank you again, and thanks again. As Longo has said, it's been a lovely pleasure having you, and thank you so much for the time that you spared. Hans, a lot more, Keith as well, and Longo as well. Thank you so much for coming through, and we look forward to more interactive sessions ahead. And yeah, to the rest of our audience, thank you so much for signing in and choosing to spend the rest of your afternoon starting 2 p.m. and up to now, and just to join us throughout this session. Of course, there's still wider discussions to be had, and there's still more that could be discussed, and you can always engage on those. And if there are any other topics that you'd like us to cover, please do send them through, and we're able to see how we can work on that. But thank you so much for joining, and thank you. We'll keep you posted when we will be hosting the next one and where we share the video and presentations via our social media and our communication channels. Thank you once again, and enjoy the rest of the week.
Thank you.
Thank you.